All right, what we're going to look at today is getting started on your research and claim assignment. And you would have had a bit of practice doing this kind of thing in Year 9 and Year 10 in particular. However, this one's a little bit different, or it's got a little bit of additional stuff involved. So the whole idea of a research and claim is to answer a question that's related to the topic in and around the claim. So you've got to keep that in mind, that the whole purpose of this is to answer that question as best as possible. So you're not really writing an essay to try and teach someone about the topic. You're not educating someone. You're trying to answer the question using data. So a good place to start with this is having a look at the ISMG, so the Instrument Specific Marking Guide. And the thing that we're going to try and start with is this research and planning section. So in the ISMGs, you have different levels. So these are the top two levels, and this is what you should be aiming for. So the very first thing that we need to do is try and come up with a research question. Now, for us to get up in this 5 and 6 mark region for a research question, is that our research question needs to be specific and it needs to be relevant. If you compare that to a 3 and 4, it's just a relevant research question. Now, getting up into this 5 and 6 region for our research and planning is pretty straightforward if you're really careful and you understand what you need to do. So this is just pretty much, if you use sufficient and relevant sources, which we'll talk about later, and your research question is specific and relevant, then it pretty much almost guarantees you a 5 at least. If your rationale is also good, then you're starting off with a 6, and there's some really kind of, I shouldn't say easy, but they're really achievable marks to get and will help to boost up your overall grade with this. Okay, so what we're going to do, and the easiest way for me to show you this, is to show you a bit of an example of some planning when approaching this task. Now, the other thing that's really important with this task is that it's not something that you can just start writing from the start and write through and finishing at the end. The hard work here is all in the planning, and what you should be doing is have a complete idea of what it's going to look like before you even start writing a paragraph. Okay, so the hard work here is doing the planning at the start, not so much in the writing. The writing comes later, and if your planning is very good, then the writing will become a lot easier as well. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. So here's an example of a claim. Biofuels are more efficient and have less environmental impact than fossil fuels. Okay, so if we have a look at this claim, it's a fairly general claim. And what we need to do is try and construct a relevant and specific research question from this claim. So let's try and deconstruct this claim here. So what we've got is a few different aspects of the claim. We've got biofuels and we've got fossil fuels. All right. We can think about this as being like our independent variable. This is what we're changing. We're going to compare a biofuel, we're going to compare a fossil fuel, and we're going to somehow assess which one's better or worse based on some factors. So looking at this, so biofuels are more efficient and have less environmental impact than fossil fuels. So we're going to assess biofuels and fossil fuels based on their efficiency and their environmental impact. Now, efficiency, environmental impact can mean many different things, okay? Environmental impact could be, releasing toxic gases, it could be killing animals, it could be killing people, it could be destroying all sorts of different stuff. So it's a very general term. And what we need to do, again, to generate a specific and relevant research claim is deconstruct this claim into something very specific, all right? Now, so again, we've got our independent variable, our comparing our biofuels and our fossil fuels, and we've got two ways to assess it, and it needs to be based on efficiency and environmental impact. So, what you have is a planning document that you need to fill out, and in this planning document, it's all about trying to work towards a specific and relevant research question, but you need to be very flexible when you do this. You can't just approach this, write a question and answer that question, because you might find that you can't find data, it might be too complex, there may be, you can't find the right data set for the right question and so on. So you really need to be flexible in that you can modify your research question as required, and you need to sort of not lock into a really specific research question from the start. There needs to be some backwards and forwards until you get your perfect research question. And you may even find that your research question isn't even locked in properly until the end when you've done all the rest of the work. Okay, so let's get back to this example. So again, we've got biofuels and fossil fuels, our independent variable, and we're going to assess this on efficiency and environmental impact. So I'm no expert on biofuels and fossil fuels, so the first thing that I needed to do was go and sort of go, okay, well, how can I make biofuels and fossil fuels more specific? And I said to myself, okay, well, what are some examples of biofuels and fossil fuels? Because these are very general terms. How can I evaluate that question? How can I evaluate what are biofuels and fossil fuels? Well, I can just go and find a list of examples. So I went and did a little bit of research and I found a list of some examples. So here's some example biofuels and here's some example fossil fuels. Now, I don't want to go and compare every single biofuel and every single fossil fuel because that would be too general, okay? We're looking for a specific question, not a general question. The claim is general, the question is very specific. So as I went through and I found a list of biofuels and I found a list of fossil fuels, I went, I've got some fuels, I've got a bunch of different fuels. At some stage I need to kind of assess which ones I want to compare. And one thing that stuck out when I did this to me is that biodiesel and diesel, they've got the same name, they must be similar product. Let's compare biodiesel and diesel. All right, so there's my independent variable. I've got biodiesel and I've got diesel. I can compare them. All right, up here, we're going to evaluate this on efficiency. Now, the question we're asking is, are biofuels more efficient? Efficiency can mean a lot of different things. In chemistry, one of the things that we can assess efficiency on is the enthalpy. So how much energy is stored in the two different types of fuels. So how much energy is there to release? And we should be able to find data on that, and we should be able to assess efficiency on enthalpy. This is where you need to kind of be strategic and you need to be flexible. I have no idea whether I can find data on enthalpy or not. So I went and I did some searching around Google, and I'll do another video showing you how to kind of do some efficient searches for data. And I went and found some data. So I got two data sets here. Now, when in my finished assignment, I may not necessarily use these particular data sets, but as I'm writing my research question, I'm confident now that I can actually find data about enthalpy. Okay, so our second part of this where we were working out how we're going to assess it is environmental impact. Again, environmental impact is a very general statement and it could mean all sorts of different things. Okay, so the question that we're really asking here is, do biofuels have more or less environmental impact? So I went and I did a little bit of looking, and from my background knowledge, I knew that, okay, CO2 emissions are bad for the environment, they impact the environment. So that's something that I should be able to assess environmental impact on. So I went, I found some data, I found a few data sets, And again, these may not necessarily be the best data sets that I'm going to use in my final assignment, but at least they give me confidence that I've got data already. If I can't find better data, well, I already have access to the data. As you can see here, I'm keeping the links so I know where I got it from and I can go back to it as necessary. So again, I know now that I can definitely assess CO2 emissions from biodiesel and diesel. So I've got two factors that I can assess my different fuels on. Now, again, environmental impact is a big thing, and I went, okay, well, I want to see if I can find some different aspects of environmental impact. So again, I don't know a lot about this, so I went, okay, well, let's go and look for some other hazardous things that are emitted when these fuels are burnt up. I went and I found this little diagram, and it had a few different types of things that are released when we burn fuels. It's hard to see on this, but there was nitric oxide, there was carbon monoxide, there was other nitric oxides. I could find some data about emissions from these nitric oxides, and these are in different fuels. So again, yep, big tick. I can find information about other hazardous chemicals that are emitted when we burn different fuels. Now, if I had chosen something different in here, and I went and had a look, and I was like, I just cannot find any data about this, well, I really need to go back and reassess something else. So if there was limited data here, and I couldn't find it, I've got two options. I can look harder and see if I can find it. If I can't find it, well, I'm going to go and assess something else. So instead of hazardous emissions, I might look at something else. Okay, you need to be flexible here. If you can't find the data, then go and change what you're assessing. Now, so far we've gone through all of this. We still haven't written a research question, okay? This is our kind of research and planning. I haven't written a research question because I don't know whether I can find the data to answer the particular question that I want to ask. So, big tick here, yep, I can find information about enthalpy, I can find information about CO2 emissions, I've got biodiesel, I've got diesel. I can now start thinking about refining and focusing my research question. So, when I was looking at this, I went, look, I've got enough data that I don't even need to assess another factor here. Okay, I'm not going to worry about other hazardous emissions. I'm going to focus on enthalpy, and I'm going to focus on CO2 emissions. So now I'm going to refine and focus my research question. Okay, and my question that I came up with is the combustion of biodiesel more efficient than petroleum-based diesels in terms of energy output, so enthalpy and CO2 emissions? So if I go and look at this now, I have a clear independent variable, okay? I can clearly see what I'm comparing, what I'm changing, and I've got a very clear couple of dependent variables. So if I went back to the ISMG here and I said, well, I'm looking for a specific and relevant research question, and I go back down here, is it relevant? So is this relevant? Has it got to do with fossil fuels and biofuels comparing efficiency and environmental impact? Yeah, absolutely. Is it specific? Can I go and put my finger on a independent variable that I'm changing? Can I go and put my finger on a independent variable that I'm using to measure and assess the question with? Yep, absolutely specific and relevant research question. So last thing I want to leave you with is when you're writing your research question, be flexible. Don't lock the question in and think that you have to use that question. Go through this process, find the data, find evidence to make sure that, yep, okay, I can find data to try and attempt to answer this question, and then refine and focus your research question. Look, even down the track, if I found that, look, I found some really good data about something else to do with environmental impact, I could go back and I could change my research question and go, well, I don't want to do CO2 emissions. I want to do something else because I found this really good data set that's going to help me answer that question. So there you go, research question, planning, first step to completing your research claim.